Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another installment of Show to View with Mike G, the show of life, the show of University of Houston Mezcal, wine tasting, and recording a chat on the patio of Las Perlas here in Austin, Texas. If you hear some grill noises, some birds, some sirens, that may just explain what you're hearing having recorded on that beautiful patio. Today's guest is the amazing Christopher Stevens of Craft Distillers, Inc. Some amazing brands that we're all familiar with: Mezcalero, Alapuz, Los Nojales, some great mezcales, and he was recently in town to share and teach a mezcal collective at Las Perlas here in Austin. We got a chance to sit down and talk about his life. He's kind of under the radar. He's not necessarily a social media guy, but there's lots of great tips and tricks about his life here in this chat. So without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy this great chat with Christopher Stevens of Craft Distillers, Inc.
Ultimately, the gentleman that I couldn't remember is Joel Antonio Cruz. Basically, I had just started my current position with Craft Distillers, 2008, 2009. I was a fine wine specialist in Hawaii, actually, prior to that.
Thankless job.
Yeah, really horrific position to be drinking wine in Hawaii all day.
Sure.
Really tough to leave that position, but the wife forced the hand. But nevertheless, coming over and picking up initially Los Danzantes, which is now known as Los Nojales here in the United States. Again, I had a trained wine palate. But, Mezcal, the extreme alcohol, of course, and the extreme flavor profiles just didn't register with me. And though I was selling that product, it really didn't pounce on me as it does now.
Right.
And it was actually Mezcalero release number 1 from Joel Antonio Cruz, which first time I tasted it just absolutely floored me and changed my life forever.
I used this analogy the other day. So Fugazi for me, right? So Fugazi was very instrumental for me, no pun intended. But I returned Red Medicine, which is like their middle of their career record. I returned it 4 times because I didn't fucking get it.
Sure.
And then I could get $5 here and there returning a CD. But then I finally got it, and it changed my life.
Absolutely.
So as a wine guy too, having a distinct chapter in wine, Mezcal is a more rich experience of flavor? Is it a more abrasive one? Is it a more creative one? What was it? What allowed you to actually be able to expand your palate to say, I'm going to take all this in?
It was the depth of flavor in that specific mezcal.
Yeah.
Before it was, to me, just, as everyone, like, oh, it's too smoky, or, oh, that extreme alcohol, it's just, I can't register it. It's tough. But no, it was that mezcal that not only had those aspects, but much more to it. I mean, the depth of flavor was just insane.
It's romantic,
more than maybe any drink I've ever had, including wine.
First kiss of the first love.
Compared to Sassicaia.
Yes, you remember these things.
Indeed.
Well, this story starts out, because everybody's got a tale. Maybe some people trying to act, some people trying to have that white-collar job. But you grew up in Houston, studied at the University of Houston. As a kid, academically, were you a science guy? Were you an art guy? What kinds of things were you getting into?
I definitely have a scientific or a mathematical mind, more so than the creative mind. I'm very calculated generally, and yeah, I mean, I excelled in mathematics in general if I applied myself. That varied year to year, but
why would you not have applied yourself, Chris?
Simply not being interested.
Yeah, some things just simply aren't interesting. But then when you think about mezcal, just to tie back, proofing it, that's math. How many liters it produces, you go back to math, it takes you back to those roots.
Indeed.
So deep science background and interest in math. Were your folks in that industry as well? Were they mathematicians? Were they creatives?
Not at all. Mom and dad were, I don't know. I don't know how to describe them. Challenged, let's say that.
Interesting.
Neither had a degree.
Yeah.
I was the first in my family. Well, I'm an only child. So, and my dad's an only child. So it's not comparing to much.
Genetic,
but
right?
Yeah,
Being an only child.
Indeed. Well, I have an only child as well. So there you have it. But yeah, they didn't have degrees. They had fairly, not blue collar, but middle class jobs.
Sure.
Not nothing excelling in terms of education or in anything of that nature. So.
Yeah. Where did you get the motivation then to say, well, I will be the first one to actually complete college? Because our parents set such a stage for us.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, luckily for me, they were very set on the fact that I would be going to college.
Yeah.
And once it came around, unfortunately, they didn't have the economic means to provide that to me. So
Right.
I had to work 2 jobs while supporting myself and paying my way through school.
I don't want to presume, but were these jobs in the hospitality industry?
Indeed. At any given time, I was definitely serving tables.
Yeah. Did you enjoy the people part of it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I do love people, which ultimately drew me to psychology. But yeah, the social aspect of it was definitely intriguing.
Did you find yourself someone that was maybe culinarily or, in a sense, tasting inclined? You could think about things because dissecting flavor can be mathematical.
I've always been hypercritical of my own palate,
Yeah.
and I still feel like I've got a terrible palate. However, yes, I certainly recognize well-crafted products, well-crafted foods,
Yeah.
certainly drinks when I meet them, and certainly been exposed to a lot throughout the hospitality industry.
Nice chapters. You have the wine, get a lot of a lot of experience there, and then the spirits piece here with some brandy at one point, whiskeys, mezcal, so much. So then it begs a question with the psychology piece. When you talk to people, when you think about them, do you think about what makes them tick? Do you want to dig in further as I'm doing right now? I'm actually asking a question for myself through you, Chris. So
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a very empathetic person, so I care about people.
Yeah.
And I'm very intrigued by everyone's story because obviously everyone has their own and everyone's unique in that way. So I'm a good listener, actually.
Really?
I like to listen, indeed.
Flipping this on its ear and being interviewed and, in a sense, psychoanalyzed. How does this feel, this change in dynamic?
It's abnormal for me. I'm not typically the one talking, but unless we're doing something like we are tonight in this Mezcalero presentation.
Center stage, yeah.
Certainly I step up to the plate when necessary, but certainly prefer to be a fly on the wall or a friend at the side, as it were.
It's an interesting thing. Do you feel refilled by people? So you're out, you're traveling, you're educating, you're meeting new people, you're selling as well. Does that help you refill and recharge? Just that kind of connection with people.
Absolutely. To be standing at, say, Taste of Ale at a table and have someone come up that's not, has not had mezcal find them yet. I like to be the source of that if I can, and I have been numerous times. And
Conduit.
And indeed, a conduit. Absolutely. So to see that happen and to observe that, and that's been a big part of this position with craft distillers in general.
Yeah.
Every one of our products is handcrafted and painstakingly produced. So with that, we spend a lot of money up front in the products. We spend no money in advertising or marketing at all, never have, even when we built Hangar One Vodka and built it to an international brand.
Right.
But that was a big part of what we did, just organically building these brands through quality alone, and to see people's eyes open up when they experience something that just completely shifts their mind from what they think it should be. It is hugely fulfilling.
It's robust, it's flavorful, has some depth and passion that perhaps you never experienced before. These are the things I to describe mezcal, but well made.
Absolutely.
Handmade mezcal.
Sure.
Well, before we get to the chapter with craft distillers, which you guys have been incredibly influential and you have amazing products on the market. In fact, that's San Andres Alapuz. That's my bottle for everybody to pick up. That's the island bottle. Well, I got $50, $60. I got just the pick for you.
Absolutely.
That one, man, I don't know what it is. It's got everything.
It's very approachable. I've always described it as being feminine. And,
yes.
and by no means is that a negative connotation.
No,
just
not.
floral, very approachable.
Yes.
Maybe less smoke. However, ironically, when I taste them in order, that's always the first one. Everyone thinks that's the smokiest, but that's just because it's the first one they taste. They come back to it and recognize that it's not the case. But very balanced, very approachable.
Feminine is a beautiful word for it because it's still insanely insightful and assertive with its flavor and defined. But yet it does have this sparkly, beautiful, sexy quality to it.
Yeah, bright and minerally, really coming from the soil types that those maguey are grown in.
Beautiful thing. All right, so what pulls your leg to go to Hawaii? Why? What takes you, because you finish up school at U of H, probably working a bit more, but what ultimately takes you out to the islands?
Well, the island was, and I actually stepped back before that. One piece that you're certainly not familiar with that'll be interesting is I lived in Dubai for a period of time.
So I have a look of a baffled look. What the hell were you doing in Dubai?
While studying psychology at the University of Houston, it's a long story. It's about who I knew, not what I knew. But a Swiss financial company offered me a position to come out and work in that field in Dubai. Got to live with my best friend for a period of time, about a year and a half.
Oh, that's great.
And hang out in Dubai for a year and a half.
Was there a point in which maybe you became disenchanted with clinical psychology?
Yeah, I was at a point, again, working two jobs. I had a fairly decent accident, which was a pretty big strain in many ways, namely economically.
Yeah.
There was a lot of things beating down on me at once, and this opportunity to travel and have the experience in effectively a third world country, but, Dubai, the highest standard of living in the world, I took it for the opportunity and the experience.
How long in total were you out there?
About a year and a half, I believe, was the total.
Can you still get booze there? This is really the salient question for me.
Well, I can't speak for today, but when I was there, which was prior to the big boom that everyone knows it to be now, it was very easy to get booze there.
Ubiquitous even?
So every major hotel had a bar in the base of it that anyone could go in and drink. And then the country or state emirate operated liquor stores, you would have to have something akin to a passport to go there and purchase. Okay. And you're allotted a certain amount if you had this passport. Well, the general manager of our office, who was Chinese, by the way, had one. He had an allocation that was far beyond anything that he could ever consume, so he would give it to us. And even though it had his picture on it, we could walk in and buy whatever we wanted.
Talking about who you know.
Indeed.
Right? What kind, man, just the concept of allocations, how much booze are we talking? Is it by ounce? Is it by bottle? What's the measurement there?
Yeah, I mean, of course everything's metric, but I don't recall exactly what it was. Yeah. But it was far more than he needed.
An ample amount for even you as well.
Indeed.
So after a year and a half, there's an event, physically traumatic or whatnot, to your point, but you want to get out of the psychology for a bit, yeah?
Yeah. And then ironically, I wanted to get out of Dubai. Best thing that it taught me was what I took for granted while living here.
Yeah. What was the thing you missed the most then?
Freedom.
I mean, we sit here, I feel like a little guilty that I'm here at a mezcaleria in Austin, Texas. There's tacos cooking next to us, and then there's beautiful spirits. So yes, the freedom is quite a nice thing. Did you head back to Houston then upon your return?
I did. The intent was to come back to University of Houston, finish up my degree, which I accomplished. So, and back into the hospitality industry along the way. So,
was there ever a placard with your name on it? Clinical psychologist Christopher.
No placards. In terms of psychology, I guess the greatest accomplishment was being a senior therapist for the largest autism project in the world.
Oh, wow.
Which was quite rewarding. Amazing work, actually. So
saddening, though?
Not necessarily. Luckily, we had a huge success rate, about 75% success rate of streamlining children with autism into regular scholastic programs and having them develop like normal children.
That's a beautiful thing. Somewhat familiar with the spectrum itself. What is something, the earlier the better?
Absolutely.
Is there a point in which it's too late age-wise for?
You can always do good for sure in terms of getting them streamlined into academic programs. 3 years old is generally kind of the where you want to have them by.
Sure.
Subsequent to that, it gets a little more challenging for sure.
Interesting. Why? It's sounding nicer and nicer. Obviously, doing good work for the community, helping children. These are all great things. But maybe you need some time to yourself to go surf, Chris. Is that what?
Yeah. Well, economics came into play again.
Yeah.
And looking at another 8 years, to get a PhD or something of that nature, another 8 years in loans and all that sort of stuff. It wasn't looking. At the time, it looked like a long time. Looking back on it, it's like, 8 years, that's nothing, right?
But at that time, man, time is always better when you're younger.
Oh, yeah. And it seems longer.
Yeah, it does.
Seems longer. And ultimately, I met my wife. So
in Texas or in?
Yes. She was in Houston. We worked at a restaurant together. She was my manager. I was somewhat the head server at a restaurant in
She was
Houston.
dipping the pen, Chris?
The
company, that's
she has a master's degree in hotel and restaurant management from University of Houston. So that is everything against anything that she had ever learned.
Sure.
So she was adamantly opposed to dating the help, as it were. Luckily, she had a twin sister who would frequent the restaurant.
That's a beauty. Oh.
Well,
sorry, I'm not trying to jump ahead, but my mind's running wild.
Back to psychology. Flirting with her twin sister in front of her was highly effective.
Was that a very deliberate strategy?
Absolutely.
You shrewd bastard, you.
I moved in with both of them 2 months later into a house in the Heights.
Taking it. You guys fell probably pretty quickly after that, then.
Things progressed relatively quickly. I don't know if it was her being as much into me as I was into her, or she just wanted to get a family started.
I see. You're a tall guy. You look pretty virile. I think this will work out.
Yeah.
And you have a beautiful son now, which is great.
Yes, which kind of brings us to Hawaii. So getting out to Hawaii, which is where he was born, by the way. So my son was born on Maui.
Conceived in Houston?
Conceived in Maui, delivered on Maui.
It's a good story.
Absolutely. She, again, back to her background, she got an opportunity to be a director of food and beverage at one of the top resorts in Hawaii, namely on Lanai, the island of Lanai. So that's what ultimately took us out to Hawaii. In fact, we came home from our honeymoon, and in fact, we got married here in Austin.
No way.
Yeah, at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center.
Beautiful.
So we wanted to be outside of Houston. We used to work at a place that was known for weddings, etc. And we wanted to be outdoors, and there's really nowhere else in Houston to do it. So we had to get here. Nevertheless, we went on our honeymoon, and literally, I would say, 5 minutes after we walked through the door, Jessica, my wife, got a call, and it was from an acquaintance of her who was general manager of this resort, offered her the director of food and beverage position. Wow. It took me all of about half a second to say yes to moving to Hawaii.
What did you envision yourself doing in Hawaii? I'd think beach bumming, some pina coladas. Just for a little while anyway.
Well, on the island that we were moving to, I had in my sights a director of beverage position that I really wanted.
As well.
So there were 2 resorts. I wanted to be the director of beverage at the other. Unfortunately, I had to stay behind and wrap things up, sell cars, get things packed, etc. By the time I got out there, that position was filled. So that wasn't available. So that all of a sudden crushed that idea. But yes, at the same time, I was swimming with dolphins in the wild on the weekends and that sort of thing on Lanai. So
is it as picturesque as one might think?
It can be.
Yeah.
Depends on where you're at. Lanai, absolutely. Certainly parts of other islands get a little populated, and it's almost like being in Houston or Los Angeles. So, it just depends on where you're at, but you can certainly find beauty in every island, for sure.
I still haven't been. I need to go.
Highly recommend it. They don't give trips away out there by any means. But
I can only find a way to do that, to get trips. Become an ambassador, perhaps.
Absolutely.
Then they'll fly me
Now
out.
you're talking.
Great.
Now you're talking.
All right. John, can you take notes?
Justifying to the money men that you need to be in Hawaii is often very challenging, however.
Being persuasive, though, is something I quite enjoy.
Absolutely.
Diving down that road. This is where you got involved with wine, then, on the island.
Correct. So the bottom line with that other position out there that I didn't get is they offered me a position as an outlet manager, working 6 days a week, 14-hour shifts, no breaks, making half of what the servers make, which I quickly turned down. I said, I'll serve tables for you, no problem. I'd prefer that as opposed, to this, unfortunately, thankless position.
Sure.
And at that point, I got blacklisted, and no one on the island would hire me.
Wait, so you said no once?
Correct.
And then you're on a list?
That's right.
Is this a common thing?
Yes. The island was not very diverse. Ethnically, it was about 90% one ethnicity.
I see.
And if you're not in with the crew, and especially if you're new to the crew, and there's only 3,500 maybe people on the island.
Right.
A lot different than living in Austin or Houston, of course.
Kind of like paying your dues in a sense, maybe.
Yeah. You've got to work your way in, which we ultimately did, and all was well. But initially, no, I didn't have a job for about 3 months.
Man.
And then one of my mentors in the industry ultimately was over on the island and selling to my wife, being the director of food and beverage, and they were looking for a fine wine specialist on the west side of Maui, which I ultimately became.
How was that chapter? Nice one?
Absolutely one of the best experiences of my life.
Yeah.
I've taken a ferry, 45-minute ferry ride over to Maui daily, with dolphins jumping and whales breaching, and
I'm gonna start tearing up here, Chris. I mean, it's very muggy out right now and lots of grayness. So
I covered about a 10-mile stretch on the west side of Maui, which was an amazingly brilliant territory with many huge resorts, the Ritz-Carlton, etc. out there, Westin, many others, Hyatt, etc. But yeah, literally drinking wine in Hawaii all day, and then taking the ferry back with the sun setting behind Lanai, and maybe having a beer. I drink beer at the end of the day. Everyone's like, "Aren't you the wine guy?"
You scale down, right?
Well, yeah.
I guess that the book would read as you write your autobiography in your later years. I drank wine in Hawaii all day. That's a beautiful sentiment. I can't wrap my head around it.
I'd like to get back to that at some point.
I think that it's very feasible. But as I read on the Craft Distiller's site, it seems like your boss found you, that he picked you out of the lot and said, "You're the golden boy, Mr. Stevens."
Somewhat. I had some exposure to him, as I did a lot of suppliers. Certainly being in that sort of position, you network with a lot of people. And in fact, it came down to my wife wanting to get back to the mainland, closer to her family, and ultimately we needed better resources for our child. Who, Hawaii, unfortunately, for all its beauty, there are some limitations. One, it's the most remote landmass in the world,
Sure.
So healthcare, schooling, etc., is fairly limited.
I didn't realize that. Yeah.
So we knew that we needed to get back at some point for Austin, my son, to grow up. But I did it grudgingly, and I networked grudgingly and slowly to find the right position. So
I make that noise because I think we know what the
Absolutely.
noise means, right? Like, all right.
Yeah, it was tough. I did delay it at one point. Basically, I got Jessica to move to the Big Island, so we relocated there for about a year and a half. But that was about the extent of it, and then we had to get back.
So where was this when you moved into Colorado?
Yes. So I actually initially accepted a position with another company Took an interview with my current company on a whim. I was actually flying into Vegas to be in one of my good friend's weddings.
Yeah.
And my current boss flew in to snag me in the airport on the way to sit me down and put their offer on the table. And it destroyed the offer of the other company. And it wasn't economically.
Right.
The other company offered much more economically. It was more the position and the products.
The artistic nature of it, perhaps? Maybe the cultural impact?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that starts from the top. It starts with our founder, Ansley Cole, who's Buddhist. And he sets the tone for everything within our company.
That's beautiful. Where does he reside now? Where's he living?
He has a 2,000-acre ranch in Mendocino County, which he bought in 1974. And that's where Germain Robin was formed and spawned, as it were.
Oh, that's beautiful. Does that calmness, that centeredness, has that rubbed off? I mean, to me, you seem very centered and very calm already. But was that something, that culture coming top down, that is driven by Buddhism, which I fully think is a beautiful thing? Did that affect you at all? Did that change the way that maybe your temperament was?
I've always been somewhat relaxed and laid back. I just happened to fit into this culture, which again is back to part of what made it more appealing.
Yeah.
We certainly do things in a different way, and it's more caring about the product, caring about the people who are experiencing it, and not trying to make you think you're sexy if you drink it.
Right. Which is a very noble thing in a world in which lots of people are trying to do just the opposite. But you know what's nice is that Mezcalero, which you're here at Las Perlas, Austin, to guide us through this unprecedented flight, if you will, this experience. Before you even showed up, people were talking about Mezcalero. It's like Kaiser Sose, in the good way. It's this character that has this personality, this cachet already before you even walk into a room, and you can hardly even get the bottles. You got to look really, really deeply to try to find them. Is that kind of nice that you've got your guys that will work for Mezcal every bit of the time, but then you have those unsung heroes that are truly cult favorites?
Absolutely, and that is somewhat by design for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
One, when you're talking batch distillation, and specifically with Wild Maguey,
Yeah.
you can't keep a consistent Wild Maguey release,
Right.
which certainly many brands try to do. And by all means, there's plenty of great stuff out there. But, we wanted to keep it small for a number of reasons. One, you can't replicate. Even if you've got Joel Antonio Cruz making Mezcalero 1 and 4 and 7, each one of those batches, even if you use the same Maguey, 2 years later, it's going to be completely different, just like vintages in wine.
Absolutely. We're different. Their performance is captured in a singular moment. And that's the thing that I love about Mezcal. So that is by design the perennial and kind of the snapshot essence of Maguey at a certain time and place.
Definitely. And the first release was 120 bottles. So Texas actually got 6 bottles.
That's it.
That was 6 bottles of the number one
we're a
release.
pretty big state. I think we've proved now that we are a bigger market, yeah?
Well, no, it's just that was all there was.
That was it.
However, just for export outside of California, of course, being our home market. And I wanted more, by all means. I hand sold every one of those bottles here in Austin, and unfortunately my distributor at the time couldn't figure out how to distribute them. So they actually went undistributed, sat in their warehouse for half the case, sat in the warehouse for a couple years until I found them. And then 2 disappeared, and then 1 I tried to purchase myself through a friendly retailer here in Austin. And the distributor broke it in their delivery of bottles. So yeah, really, really rare stuff.
It's been an uphill battle. But people now, almost 10 years later in this role with craft distillers, how is the perception, the openness, the transparency around Mezcal now versus 10 years ago?
In terms of us, or in terms of the industry as a whole?
General industry, yeah.
Yeah, general industry, it's opened up immensely. I mean, when we started, it was, I think it was, of course, Del Maguey. It was us with Danzantes, and now Nahuales, and I think Sombra came along. And of course, you've got Scorpion, of course, and you've got
Montalban.
Yeah,
right?
Monte Alban, right? But which of course everyone assumed Mezcal was. because they saw Urban Cowboy or something. But
It didn't have a worm. It wasn't mezcal. People still say that shit to me. I'm like, all right, man.
Brutal.
It's
Brutal.
brutal.
First thing I do, any uninitiated person to mezcal, I say, critter in a bottle, don't drink it.
Yeah, that actually is a great indication. You should just stay away. You know, do you ever watch? We were just talking about 80s movies. Of course, I got to go on this tangent. Poltergeist 2. Did you ever
Sure.
remember Craig T. Nelson? And once he drinks that worm, it turns into a big monster. How could anybody think that was a good thing? Horrible thing.
I think that would scar everyone.
That's exactly right. Well, I guess it just goes to show how many people,
That-
rather how many few people watch that movie.
You just scare me. You just brought back something I'd repressed. Like, whoa, I've forgotten about that.
I know. I just have this stupid, uncanny ability to bring everybody's nightmares back. There's a movie coming. There's a movie idea in there.
Indeed.
It's like Freddy
better
Krueger.
graphics now.
Oh, totally. Better graphics. So we have this amazing fight this evening. And you as a conduit to Mezcal, conduit to the people and the places of each of these bottles we'll be tasting, which, again, unprecedented. I say that because I want everybody to really embrace how limited edition, I guess you could call these bottles, how few of them there are. What are a few objectives for you that you want us as an audience with you to experience this evening?
First and foremost is to understand, the place and the people,
Yeah.
obviously, and the products and where they're coming from. And the secondary would be, our intent in the whole process, which isn't to make money, it's to have those people make money.
Yeah.
And in fact, in our processes, we've had MBA students, 20 MBA students from Yale, for example, come down to investigate the socioeconomic impact, things like Ali Poos,
Yeah.
and Mezcalero being part of that project as well, are having on these individual villages, which is significant. It's really significant. So back to our founder, that was his whole intent with even creating the Mezcalero brand to begin with, is to draw this amazingly crafted product which is interwoven in just the fabric of these individuals' lives, and bring it to the forefront for them to make a living off of it and not have to just turn to be corn farmers or whatever it is.
Not
right?
ditch the McGay. I mean, that's how it is in tequila, right? Like, well, we're not making enough money, so we're going to go to corn. Corn isn't the same thing. It's so different culturally. So from a man who is centered and has peace, he wants to give back to humanity, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
Not to, like, speak to
No,
volumes about
that's
it, but
absolutely
it.
it. And it's his favorite place. He's down there, probably 3, 4, 5 times a year.
Yeah.
He frequents Oaxaca and does a walk across the desert from Mexico City in his bare feet over a multiple day period, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Quite a profound individual.
I have to meet him. I
would highly recommend it.
Yeah.
He's
How
an
often do
interesting
you
cat.
get to see him?
Get to see him is rarely, maybe once, twice a year.
Yeah.
But I was just on the phone with him on the plane,
Right.
before I flew here today.
Keeping in touch. Any dark horses, unreleased tracks, B-sides that we've got in this flight tonight that we wouldn't be expecting?
Well, I mean, we've added, and this is actually a common one here in Texas, Mezcalero 12, but that is a special one because I actually negotiated Mezcalero 12 to be an exclusive to Texas.
Oh, really?
So that's why it's been around for so long here. Everyone else, when I go up to Illinois, which is one of my bigger markets, that certainly a lot of supporters of Mezcalero up
Chicago's
there.
big, yeah.
And they've all been very upset with me ever since I took 12 down here, and no one's been able to get a bottle up there. So
We're pretty brilliant here, though, Chris. You've got a Mezcal Reviews. Tyler and Johnny are here. I mean, there's a great community for it. You know what? And I'm going to say it. And if this is like a whole White Sox fucking Cubs thing, that's fine. Austin has a better Mezcal community than Chicago. I'm saying it. You do not have to chime in. I don't want you to. Let me take the punch for it. But I've got beers
Interesting.
raising to salute that sentiment.
interesting.
I think it is. We're closer. They're our neighbors, after all.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, I'll plead the fifth there. I will argue that they both places have phenomenal programs. Many amazing places.
Your
Some not
diplomacy-
so.
Yeah, yes,
amazing.
that's good.
But some people getting it, some people aren't, as with anything.
And I feel very privileged, and I feel very lucky to sit down and chat with you and have access to such beautiful distillate. I mean, above anything else, no matter where you are, here in Austin, the culture has allowed us to do this, and us having this community and just this collaboration with each other. And I was reading that Bill Norris is not in town. He's going to be quite upset
Indeed.
about it.
Yes, yes.
I'm going to have to rub it in just a little bit.
Well, I offered doing one at his house maybe next time, so you'll have to be invited to that.
It would be lovely.
But back to that point, in your point about it being so rare, this is actually the first time I've ever seen a vertical tasting of Mezcalero open to the public.
Yeah.
I've been part of many. In fact, back to Chicago, an aviary. I did a staff training there.
Okay. Well, that's
a number
fair.
of years ago, right? From literally number 1 to, I think at that time it was, I don't know, maybe up to 8, 9 somewhere. But I do have a friend in Kansas City, a close friend in the industry, and a big influence on me in terms of Mezcal in general. He has the greatest collection of Mezcalero of anybody in the world, period.
Really?
And he has cases of each, starting at number 1. So I've done the whole vertical with him multiple times. But
I mean, the tears kind of started to come out. They're percolating, right? That is an amazing thing. So I got 2 questions left for you because, you got to warm up, you got to do your lifts, so your biceps punch through before you're on stage here with this whole Mezcal crew. So let's say you were talking about Mezcalero number 2, I think it was, before we started. Was it 2 or 4 that we're talking about?
1, 4, and 7, all coming from Joel Antonio
Perfect.
Cruz.
So number 4, you're at anywhere in the world, and you're sipping Mezcalero number 4. Who would you love to have a conversation with anybody living or deceased? Sit there, sip, and wax poetic about life.
Well, that's a good question. Many people come to mind, but probably the most intriguing to me would be one of my 2 grandfathers, maybe both. But there is one specifically, my dad's father, who passed away when I was 2 or 3. So obviously I didn't get a chance to get to know him or meet him, and that's kind of a blank spot in understanding of myself and certainly that portion of my family.
Absolutely.
So being able to have that conversation with him and that exposure to his experience and understanding of his life would be great.
The connection to the past helps us understand the future.
Absolutely. Most important.
Well, my last question for you, before you're off into the wild with the rest of this media charade that there's people waiting to talk to you. I was listening back to, and we were talking about this interview with Graciela Angeles from Real Minero, and she said, I haven't been able to prove it, but Mezcal has a psychological impact on people, especially those who are creative, those who write, those who compose. What do you feel? How do you feel about that?
I agree 100%. Many people talk about it, those that know Mezcal and have experienced it enough. It's uplifting. It's much different. It's not a depressant like all other alcohol.
Right.
It's uplifting and energetic. And by all means, I mentioned how I'm very mathematically minded, very black and white. It absolutely opens me up and helps me to think more creatively. I agree 100% with that.
That's an amazing lubricant for creativity. Adding it to the list of the other benefits, the massive list already.
Yes, quite the list, but I'm finding amongst alcohol, it's really the only way to go, and I find myself quite unhappy when I mix it with anything else.
Yeah.
I like to get pure, maybe a beer here and there, but Mezcal is really where it's at, and like to stay away from the rest.
Mezcal is the way to go. See, perfect way to wrap this thing, and we've got a nice evening ahead of us with this beautiful vertical. And Chris, thank you so much for joining me, and thanks for being in Austin, man.
Thank you immensely for your time.
Yeah, it's
and
been a
the
wonderful
opportunity.
chat. Sipping Mezcal with you. This is how it's done. So talk soon. Thank you so much.
Salud.
Well, there you have it. Mr. Christopher Stevens of Craft Distillers, Inc., bringing some of the finest mezcals and spirits into the States. You know, if you have not had one of the, I think they're up to about 22, 23 marks now, one of the Mezcalero blends, single varietals as well, they are some of the finest mezcales that you will ever try. And Chris is not concerned about advertising. He's not concerned about social media. He's concerned about the people, the places, the flavors, and the amazing category of agave. And Chris, thanks so much for sitting on that amazing patio. You know, we've got the grill from Asador back there grilling some meat. You got some birds chirping. It's like being in a real, true open air market. It's a great experience to sit down and chat with you. So thanks everybody for listening to Show to V with Mike G. No matter how difficult it is to make corn tortillas, or if you're thinking, man, I don't know what to go see in the theater next, perhaps I'll just sit and binge Netflix. Once again, please keep dancing.